The Department for Diaspora Activities in the World Zionist Organization aims to enhance the relationship between the State of Israel and the Jews around the world. We encourage everyone to explore their Zionist identity in their own way, and we offer Israel as a tool in creating constructive conversation about identity. The Department for Diaspora Activities presents and engages in activities on 6 continents, in small and large Jewish communities, through the work of dozens of Israeli shlichim and local employees, and in cooperation with the various Zionist federations and delegations in communities around the world.
Join us in this journey. It's about our future, and we can make it a better future.
Just thumbs up. Very good. We are broadcasting to you live from Jerusalem. As you can see, I'm so excited to be here with you. Thank you so much for joining us. iVision Live is brought to you by the Department of Diaspora Affairs in the World Zionist Organization, led by Gusti Yoshua Braverman, that is, of course, here with us today. Hello, Gusti. As well as the rest of the staff and shlichim from the department from all over the world, including myself. My name is Matan, and I run the Media and Projects Division. Feel free to introduce yourself using the chat box below. Tell us where you're from. We had participants from the United States, of course, but from more exotic locations like Kosovo, Turks and Caicos Island, really from all over, and it's really delightful to see. I will just say that this session will be recorded today, so if you don't want to be in our recording, you can turn off your camera. But if you don't mind, please leave them open. It's great to see your faces and to interact with you during this session. To me, it's always moving to see, you know, so many different faces from all around the world. And it's really amazing how we all come together during these challenging times like these. And to speak more about challenging times and about the magnificent untold story of Operation Abraham, the connection between Brit Milah of Russian Jews in Israel and the prevention of HIV in Africa, I am very proud to welcome our distinguished guest speaker, Dr. Inon Shenkar, global health scientist and former scientist at the World Health Organization, Geneva. I will just say before you start, Inon, that if the participants have any questions that pop during the webinar, feel free to ask using the chat box. And in the end, I will facilitate a short Q&A session together with Inon, Dr. Shenkar, and הבמה שלך, Dr.
Great. Actually, I was almost speechless when I've seen the and heard the songs of Shlomo Artzi, a great fan of Shlomo. Let me try to upload our presentation and assure you that this is not going to be a medical nor an alarming type of a conversation. What I very much hope to do is actually to tell you a story. It's an untold story, or not many people know of that story, that really connects very nicely all of us to public health, and you'll see the connection in just a short while. Give me just 1 second to try and work out the presentation, and then we are ready to go. Okay, are you able to see the screen?
We can see the screen, not the presentation yet.
Cool. We are in a tough situation worldwide. The coronavirus infection, this is a snapshot from the Johns Hopkins University in the US. Just a couple of hours ago, we are reaching close to 100,000 infected in speedy way, even reaching in Europe numbers which are higher. The world is reaching the 1 million infected, and we see also the number of deaths. But I think that what I'll try to do is actually to explain a few things which I think that as individuals we may want to look at, which is two epidemiological terms I would like to present to you as we look at this alarming chart of the world being hit by a virus infection. One is called a global fatality rate. The global fatality rate is basically the number of people.
Just Inon, yes, sorry to interrupt, but we will load the presentation maybe from our computer because we can see it.
1 minute.
There we go. Can you see it now?
Thank you. So if you can move to the next slide, and you can put it on the full
and I'll
screen.
put it on the full screen. Very well.
Cool. So coronavirus infections, almost 1 million people. We see the number of deaths. The global fatality rate is an important figure. It actually tells us the proportion of those who have died out of those who have been confirmed as infected with the coronavirus. The global rate is around 4%, but it's interesting to see diversity between different countries. For example, I picked up the numbers for China, which is the first country that really been exposed and experienced COVID-19 in a great way. And their fatality rate was 3.9%. In Italy, it's very high, 11.7%. In Israel, we are talking about less than 0.5%. And in Germany, 1%. Why is this diversity? As I said and promised, this is not going to be a medical presentation, but just for you who are curious why Italy, the proportion of elderly people, old people beyond the age of 65 are considered elderly by all kind of statistics and epidemiological factors, is very, very high. And so we know that the virus is more prone to infect people with other conditions, but also age plays a major role. And so we see the old persons around the world being infected at higher numbers than others. But there is also the recovery rate, which is also very impressive. It's globally 20%. In Israel, it's 4%. The reason why it's only 4% is because we are experiencing this pandemic only for the last couple of weeks, though it seems like much more. And so many people are still under recovery, and they will recover. And in China, which is the most impressive number, is 92%. So we are not talking about a dramatically killing disease. We are talking about a pandemic, very serious. It shuts the world down. But what I would like to share with you is the fact that when we, if you can move to the next slide, look actually a little bit back, we have to remind ourselves that we are still living in an era of HIV and AIDS. And AIDS will take us through most of my presentation today, but in a very different way, I think, that what many of you might have expected. But just to remind ourselves, so we are talking about 40 million people around the world who are carrying the HIV, the virus that causes AIDS. It used to be a killing disease. If you think about New York, if you think about California, if you think about definitely sub-Saharan Africa, I mean, people dying from AIDS on a daily basis, on an hourly basis. If we look at the lower part of the slide in front of you, you see that in 2018, there have been more than 700,000 people who have died due to AIDS. And that's already when we have medications, when we have testing. And the total number of people who've surrendered to the disease of the 72 million, 73 even million individuals infected with HIV since 1981 till today is 32 million. We are very, very, very far from that. And still AIDS is a pandemic ahead of us. The next slide will actually take us through a bit of the curves. You know, they are talking, or epidemiologists and medical people, public health experts, talking about the curve, right? Trying and inform us about how important it is actually that COVID-19 would not hit health systems in a dramatic way. Well, this curve is taking us through years of an escalation of the number of people infected towards 2000, 2004. And then we see the reduction in number of HIV infected. And this is due to testing, to protection, to the prevention messages that worked when people have been able to, for themselves, protect themselves in the means of not getting infected with HIV, both heterosexually and otherwise. And also because of the enormous effort globally to address the HIV pandemic. But it's still with us. And if we move to the next slide, actually, we can see that today, a major concern of people like myself in public health who have been working in HIV and now have shifted to also give support to COVID-19. What do you do if you are an HIV infected individual, that you take medications? Will you have the medications come at your door in the right time, the right amount? If not, what would happen to your immune system? If you are taking your medications, your immune system is not suppressed. But what if you are living in Africa or in the Caribbean or in Southeast Asia, where actually you are still not on medication because of access issues, then you are suppressed, and then comes COVID-19. How would you be able to tolerate a situation of two infections, HIV and COVID, for example? Major issues for those who are concerned with infectious diseases around the world. And the next slide will actually take us to the question of the vaccine. Okay, we're talking about hopefully within a year to have the COVID-19 vaccine. I won't state my opinion about that, but hopefully there will be a vaccine. In AIDS, we had a vaccine, quote unquote, of course, and the vaccine has been the condom. So when people were using condoms, still are, whether it's the female condom on the right side of the slide or the male condom on the left side of the slide, then this was a preventative, protective measure. There was another measure that was protective for HIV, and here starts our story of tonight. Actually, the next slide will take us very close to Pesach, because when we talk about HIV prevention, it's interesting to note that in the 4th dynasty of the pharaohs in Egypt, one could have already seen that circumcision and even adult male circumcision was common. The ability for the community of non-Jews in Egypt to have been able to survive different diseases that we don't even know of is correlated somehow to circumcision. So the fact that male circumcision has been practiced for many, many years is relatively known. And obviously we know of Abraham that circumcised himself, Ishmael, and his entire men around him. And the circumcision, by the way, is not more common in Jews than others. There are 600 million Muslims who are circumcised in the world we live in. The next slide. Interestingly, research had shown back in already the 1980s, but more profoundly in the 1990s, that circumcision could prevent HIV. The slide in front of you is a medical slide, but it's actually very easy to understand. If you look at the upper side of the slide, you see countries that practice circumcision in Africa, and they are practicing circumcision either because of Islam, like Senegal, and others because of practices that are common within the tribal living and cultures of Africa. The lower part of the slide shows those countries where circumcision is not practiced commonly. And you can see that the infection rates are much higher among those countries that practice circumcision rather than those countries that do not. The next slide takes us to the question of, okay, so if circumcision could prevent HIV and actual research needed to be compelling enough and strict enough to suggest a public health intervention, then what do we do about it? The science here comes from 2004 and 2005. This has been widely published. 3 trials, random trials, clinical trials in Africa, actually in Uganda, in South Africa, and in Kenya, have done the following. Groups of approximately 5,000 men have been split into 2 groups. One have been circumcised and the others have not. they have received the same education about HIV prevention and went on to lead their lives. After 2 years, all these men were tested again for HIV, and surprisingly, those who were circumcised have had such a lower incidence of HIV that the trial needed to stop because it became unethical to continue this trial and expose men who have not been circumcised to HIV. In other words, 60% protection and later on 74% protection has been recorded in men who have been circumcised as adults in Africa. Wow, that's another support to the condom. Definitely when African men have 12 condoms per year, and I think that they have more sex than 12 times per year. So here comes a one-time intervention, surgical, true, that could enhance and protect men, and if they are protected, women as well, from HIV, a killing disease in the 1990s and still today. If that is true, which was confirmed over and over by different studies that looked at the results of the randomized controlled trials in Uganda, in Africa, South Africa, and in Kenya, then countries must act on that. In other words, it became a policy discussion within ministries of health. How do they now start to promote medical circumcision for HIV prevention? The policies started to appear, and what you see in front of you are several of them, including Kenya. But the big question in the next slide was, how do you get 20 million African men circumcised in 10 years? And the reason for these two numbers was that if 20 million men in Africa will be circumcised, that's the end of the HIV epidemic. Okay. Circumcision, as we know it, is a very quick cut. And when you're 8 days old, this quick cut is done by a mohel. It's not a medical person. And most of us, I can speak for myself, had survived it quite okay. But when you're an adult, 13 years old, 30 years old, 40 years old, 27 years old, and you're offered circumcision to protect your life and those that you are having heterosexual sex with. And it's important to mention that all studies have shown that circumcision is supporting prevention of HIV only in heterosexual relationships, and primarily when the infected is the female. However, also when a man will not be infected from his sexual partner, he will not infect others later on. So how do you get 20 million men in Africa circumcised in 10 years? The next slide. Obviously, in our tradition, you ask the rabbi. Well, the picture that you're going to see in the next slide, you may have never seen before, and I promise you that you will probably not see in any other place than in this presentation. So let's see, what did the rabbi say? Well, the rabbi is, of course, a pluralistic way to say, we ask the experts. Israel has benefited from a huge migration of Jewish people, primarily from the former Soviet Union, from Ukraine, Russia, Belarus, Romania, other countries, and Ethiopia. Arriving at the borders of Israel, they became Israeli very quickly, but there was something missing. Actually, it was an additional thing they had, which they wanted to remove. That was the circumcision they wanted, even if they have passed many, many years of being 8 days old. Not many people know that of the 1 million migrants, Jewish olim to Israel, approximately 500,000 men, 210,000 have asked to be circumcised. The known stories of a grandfather coming with his 2 or 3 children and 16 grandchildren saying, B'makachat, cut us all at once. As I said, becoming very Israeli. The state of Israel needed to address this bottom-up quest of individuals that wanted to reunite with the Jewish tradition, with the Jewish people, with their faith, with their Zionism, all sorts of reasons why such a huge number actually wanted to be circumcised once becoming Oleh Hadash. But the fact of the matter was that they had wanted to, okay, but how does Israel, that knows to offer circumcision when you are 80 days old and do that through a mohel, offers a medical, surgical condition when you are a grandfather or a father or a young person? Israel needed to address that and found a way to do that by opening circumcision clinics. This is still happening, although on much lower numbers, but with the huge migration of Olim Chadashim to Israel, in the late 90s, beginning of the current century, they have actually opened clinics where physicians, surgeons, primarily those who are Shomrei Mitzvot, who could both do the act of circumcision, the removal of the foreskin, but also give the blessing and the Jewish name to the individual now being circumcised. It was a group of about 70 such surgeons who have received the training and the task to circumcise all those who wanted. And as I said, the numbers were quite huge. As they were paid by the piece, well, not really by the size of the piece, but by the number of circumcisions they conducted per day, that was a great incentive. How does it come to our story? Because actually in the hands of few surgeons, there was now the training and the ability to actually have an assembly line for circumcision. They could do perfectly well, huge number of circumcisions, actually almost no one lost their penis, actually no one was really injured. The adverse events were very minimal. They did a good job. And so we had then, as you can see in the picture, such a circumcision done with actually the Beit Din present in a surgical theater. This is a real hospital in Israel. Unbelievable, but that's the beauty of connecting tradition, Jewish life, respect for the interest of individuals to be circumcised, and respect of the law, because a neonatal circumcision cannot be, can be provided by a mohel, but cannot be provided by a mohel to anyone who is beyond 6 months of age. And so thousands and thousands, dozens of thousands of individuals in a relatively small number of years got circumcised, and these doctors actually had done a good job, but that was it for them until the next slide. Until comes the World Health Organization to Jerusalem and asks us, that is the Jerusalem AIDS Project, which I had the honor to preside of and co-chair for a number of several years. It's the Jerusalem organization that worked nationally on HIV prevention. WHO asked us, could you teach us how to transfer this knowledge of massive medical male circumcision to Africa? It was in parallel to the time where the research, the studies I've told you about appeared, and where it was possible then to connect the science of those studies, the policies that countries wanted to start actually launching circumcision programs in most African countries, and whereby there was a real need to know how to do that, and to do that fast enough, safe enough. So WHO came to ask the rabbi. I'm not a rabbi, but obviously those 70 physicians, as we can see in the next slide, that were trained in Israel to conduct the circumcision on Russian Jews, had started to apply that in Africa. Our first operation, which we dared not to name at that time Operation Abraham in full, was named by the abbreviations of Operation AB. And the country was Swaziland. So think of the coming together voluntarily, physicians from Israel who had each performed 10,000, 7,000, 9,000, huge number of circumcisions on adults, have understood how to set up an assembly line and basically transferring that knowledge, that know-how now to Africa with the need and with the interest to support the saving of lives of Africans. I'll repeat that twice. Russian Jews have actually contributed to saving lives today in Africa, and the bridge was Israeli physicians and surgeons operating under Operation Abraham at its first stage, Operation AB in Eswatini, which is the new name to the country called Swaziland. And you will see in this picture something quite interesting. You will not notice that this is a surgical theater. It's not. It's actually a small village clinic that was converted into a surgical theater. And because of the need to speed up work, you see that there is a divider with the sign of the Operation AB sign, dividing between two teams that are at the same time conducting the surgery. Let's not be alarmed. This is not under but local anesthesia. Takes about 18 minutes. The individual, we can't call them even patients, are not only not feeling anything because of the anesthesia, but they can also read a brochure, as you can see on the left side, and you'll see that even more closely in some other nice smiley pictures during that operation. The sterility necessary in a regular surgical theater is really not necessary, and was not also necessary in Israel, though the location, as you could have seen in the slide, was surgical theaters in the Israeli protocol of conducting local surgeries like with circumcision. So we started off by having 11 Israeli organizations from major hospitals. I want to name all of them: the Israeli Medical Association and the Israeli Pediatric Surgery Union, to come together, build the plan. And actually, when WHO came to Jerusalem, they were fortunate enough to find that the Israeli teams also have the possibility to contribute to the manual. So the manual on how to conduct medical male circumcision on adults voluntarily for HIV has actually been blessed by Israeli inputs that are until today guiding many, many teams throughout Africa and also in Haiti and in a few other countries to conduct this operation. From Swaziland, in the next slide, we went to even a more interesting and challenging story, whereby we, on one hand, allowed ourselves, after the success of the Swaziland trial and pilot, to move to call ourselves Operation Abraham. And those of us who speak English obviously know that the word operation in this case has two meanings, but Abraham for us has one meaning, and the meaning is not only for the Jewish people. So when we talk about the cooperation between countries, as you can see the three flags with Israel in the middle, on the left it's Senegal, and on the right it's South Africa. And indeed, what you see in front of you in the picture in Tel HaShomer, in the Sheba Hospital, is a team coming from Senegal of Muslim physicians who have had great experience in circumcising in their own country, both young adults and others, often also children, but definitely beyond 8 days, and trying to build a collaboration, which is a multinational, but also multi-religious, using the expertise based on religious reasons to conduct fast, or I would say high volume and high speed medical male circumcision. With this training and becoming familiar, working together in Israel, we could have moved to the next slide, where actually this team could have applied their experience in Durban, in KwaZulu-Natal, which was the first part of South Africa that invited us to support. You will not guess what is behind the shop, if you want, that is in front of you. It used to be a shop before it became Asipile, which in the Zulu language stands for Let's Be Healthy. That was the name of the hospital's clinic. St. Mary's Hospital in Marian Hill in KwaZulu-Natal was actually the collaborating partner to implement for the first time in Africa a hospital, community, surgical facility close to a taxi rank and to people that would come from the street, basically, men, to be circumcised. The next slide will show you how we received this facility in April of 2010. Actually, I just noticed this afternoon that we are celebrating 10 years to Operation Abraham. It really started on the 2nd of April, 2010, with my meeting of Dr. Douglas Ross, the head of that hospital, by chance, by accident, some will say by God's will, in Durban, and that launched this very interesting collaboration that I'm going to expand a little bit more and tell you about. So this is how this garage or shop or place looked like. And in the next slide, you'll see how it looked only 3 months later. A fully equipped 4-bed surgical clinic with also counseling rooms, recovery rooms. You don't send someone who has been just operated immediately to the street. It takes a protocol, a medical protocol, being respectful to the individual, to his health condition, though, as I said, it's a very easy operation to conduct. With the facility being architected by Israeli advice and local staff actually completing the work very, very efficiently and quickly, we were able to go. That meant, in the next slide, starting to train, well, thank you, starting to train not only medical surgeons or general practitioners who have medical training in South Africa, but also nurses and administrators. So what Operation Abraham was unique in is to conduct the training of local teams and not just local individuals, and using the facility in a smart way, if you allow me to say, we were able to manage the situation to be such that there is training conducted for a team of 2 doctors, 3 nurses, and 1 administrator. And so they could have built the hospital their own shifts and have a continuum to be able to produce, sorry for the language, 100 medical male circumcisions per day. Quite a lot, which could have only happened if there was sufficient training in this assembly line I was telling you before, that was actually not just transferred from Israel, but adapted to the local needs. And in the next slide, you'll see that they came to the work very enthusiastic. And this is already the 2 trainees from South Africa that have received training by our Israeli team of Operation Abraham, conducting the operation. And as you can see, the individual also in the next slide, which will be perhaps somewhat surprising, because also female physicians have been not only allowed, but encouraged. I don't know the reason, but they have been actually very good in conducting the fast-moving, high-volume, high-quality circumcisions. And the young fellow, young being from 14 years old to 45 years old, reading a brochure about HIV prevention in order to still enhance the prevention in the country. It's all very nice, 100 circumcisions per day. Can we move to the next slide, please? And I have only maybe 6 more slides to share with you. We needed scale up because the target was 20 million men. And you don't get 20 million men by having 1 clinic conduct 100 circumcisions per day. So the Zulu people have a leader, and his name is Goodwill Zwelithini. I think that you can identify between him and me who is he. And indeed, Goodwill Zwelithini was one of the leaders in South Africa as a cultural leader that enhanced the effort nationally and then in the whole continent to provide a medical male circumcision to his people. He actually ordered all of his guards. You see the one a little bit fatter than I am on the right-hand side. This guy is Sayeret Matkal of the king, Goodwill Zwelithini. He has a machine gun behind. You don't see that. I did. And this team of the highest protection unit of the king were the first ones to be ordered to go into Asipile while the Israeli team was still there. to have the most beneficial circumcision by the hands of those who have been trained by the Israeli physicians first and got most experience. He then ordered the 10 million Zulus to get circumcised, and in fact, one can see the lowering number of HIV infections in KwaZulu-Natal post the beginning of Operation Abraham interventions there. So scanning up was important, and you can see in the next slide, this is from one of the research papers that have been published about Operation Abraham in the medical literature, that indeed from 0 to over 5,000 circumcisions in 18 months is an enormous success. Not for us, really, for the local teams that were able to quickly learn and implement the Israeli method adapted for their needs on circumcision. The next slide actually demonstrates that it was not just one clinic. Operation Abraham, that was continued for about 6 years, has contributed to the training of over 13 and to the opening of over 13 clinics similar to Asipile and adapted to other needs within hospitals or community facilities throughout KwaZulu-Natal. But it didn't stay only in KwaZulu-Natal. I'll show you about this in a bit. The next slide will demonstrate the happiness of the graduation of each team that comprised of both Israelis and local staff. We had invented the Asipile jump. So at the very last day of the training that lasted 1 week and simulation for another week, the graduates of the training were jumping as high as they can. The highest jumper received a nice present. It was very happy and nice. And I would like us to move to the next slide because it was a huge challenge, but an incredible collaboration of Israeli, Jewish, Muslim, and Christian physicians and nurses. The medical expertise in circumcision came primarily from Jewish surgeons, but also you should know that in the Arab population in Israel, circumcision of their sons is conducted either by Jewish mohels or by medical professionals from the Arab Muslim community. And the Christians in the team were mostly nurses from the north, from the south. And so not only a multinational, multi-faith Operation Abraham collaboration, but I think the beauty of Israel that comes in support of such a devastating disease like AIDS. The next slide will demonstrate that this has not stayed only as an effort locally. From 2010 until today, over 20 million African men had lost their foreskin in a similar procedure that you have seen some of the slides, though not close by enough, which is fine. And in the slide ahead of you, you can see how that has contributed. I'll stop here. I thank you for your attention. I hope that you have a story to tell when you sit with your families and Zoom for the Seder table. And it's definitely a story that connects not only all of us, but also the tradition of Israel to be conducting tikkun olam in a real practice of saving lives. 2.5 million African men owe their lives to former Soviet Union Jews arriving in Israel in the 1990s, and the bridge that has been created by the professional teams of Operation Abraham. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shenkar. That was really fascinating. Inon, I think it was very, very fascinating, and I see the comments that people are sending us right now. And
hello, I'm Ambassador Dani Carmon, head of Mashav, Israel's Agency for International Development Cooperation. Mashav is a branch of Israel's Foreign Ministry, of Israel's diplomacy, but unlike many other political issues dealt by Israel's diplomacy, Mashav is dealing with something else. For over 54 years, Mashav has been sharing Israel's unique experience and technical expertise to empower professionals in developing nations to meet their country's development challenges. These include the eradication of hunger and poverty, provision of food security, empowerment of women, and the upgrade of basic health and education systems. I recently returned from a working visit to Africa where I had the chance to experience firsthand the amazing programs we are implementing in the continent, amongst others, those taking place in Kumasi, Ghana. Mashav, in cooperation with the Millennium Cities Initiative and with medical teams from Israel's Soroka Hospital, is working in Kumasi to reduce neonatal and maternal mortality. To achieve these goals, we established and equipped 2 neonatal intensive care units and trained local personnel to operate them. Cooperation in Kumasi was expanded to include the introduction of a new concept of early childhood education by creating rich and stimulating environments for kindergarten children. Meeting with the kids in the kindergartens was one of the highlights of my visit. Another life-changing project is being implemented in sub-Saharan Africa. Tipa, which means a drop of water in Hebrew, is an Israeli-developed small-scale horticultural production package based on low-pressure irrigation. Benefits include the ability to produce improved quality vegetables and fruits around all year long. For the smallholder farmers of the Sahel, most of which are women, it presents a way out of poverty and the hope of meeting basic human needs. More than 250,000 people from all over the world have participated throughout the years in Mashav's programs, both in Israel and abroad. Mashav's philosophy is to encourage professionals from the developing world to find their own solutions to development issues and to adapt them to the reality of their country's specific needs and potential. Israel, through Mashav, is sharing its know-how in agriculture, in health, energy, education, the empowerment of women, and so many other fields where the Israeli experience can make a difference. Thank you for your attention. Shalom.
Mashav, Israel's Agency for International Development Cooperation, was launched 60 years ago to share the know-how and technologies which provided the basis for Israel's own rapid development. We address challenges in a holistic and innovative way and support fellow nations and communities in their struggle to achieve sustainable development. Envisioned by the nation's founders to share Israel's knowledge and experience, Mashav aims to empower those living in poverty to improve their own lives, placing people at the heart of its initiatives. Mashav focuses on capacity building programs in Israel and around the globe. Our alumni return to their home countries and adapt the knowledge and skills they acquired for the benefit of their communities. Our agricultural programs use unique techniques and farming methods developed in Israel to increase the levels, sustainability, and quality of agricultural production, paving the way for food security and hunger eradication. We believe that investment in education is an investment in our future and an agent for change. Mashav is committed to achieving quality education around the world. We coordinate Israel's official humanitarian assistance, building medical facilities and supplying medicine in the wake of earthquakes, floods, famine, and other disasters. Mashav promotes innovative entrepreneurship as a means of advancing growth and prosperity. we believe that gender equality and women's empowerment are central to reach sustainable development. Our holistic approach to gender, poverty reduction, and sustainable development changes lives all around the world. Israel shares the global responsibility of striving to achieve worldwide sustainable development in line with the UN's 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Our philosophy is to leave no one behind. During 6 decades, Mashav has trained over 300,000 people from more than 140 countries and has established development projects worldwide.
I'm so proud of being the head of Mashav, the Israeli Agency for International Development Cooperation. The essence of Mashav is to bring the Israeli spirit to all corners of the globe. And now that we are celebrating our 60th anniversary, we are so very happy to be partnering for a better world.
Mashav is a special program for me. I got not only professional experience, but also networking with the international environment.
Coming here and getting the global best practices under one roof, I have learned how to make lemonade even if you get lemons. Keep doing good work.
Felicidades, Mashav, por estos 70 aniversarios de ayuda y de creación para toda una comunidad internacional.
Coming back from the Mashav, now I have the knowledge and the tools to make a change in Serbia.
And I think this is now a dream come true.
Mazal tov to Mashav on its 60th anniversary. Mashav is Israel's international development agency. It is the pride and joy of our country. Mashav's commitment and passion for helping people is deeply appreciated by countless people. So I have one wish for you, another 60 years of success. It is truly bettering the world.
Mashav is Israel, and Israel is Mashav.
Mashav, Israel's Agency for International Development Cooperation, is celebrating 60 years of sharing its experience. Mashav, partnering for a better world.